It's the Brian Lair Show on WNYC. I'm Kusha Navidar, filling in for Brian today. What does it mean to live a life with dignity as an older person in the United States? Writer Lucy Schiller's grandmother died of COVID in 2021 in her mid-90s. Schiller noticed that people almost seemed to treat her grandmother's death as less significant, simply because she was old, as if old age made the loss expected or acceptable. That struck her as wrong, and it's one of the things that led her to look into what it's like to grow old in the United States, which of course involves navigating the wider business of elder care. Around that same time, Schiller spent a stretch living in her other grandmother's home as her caretaker. She reflects on this period of her life and on that question about growing old in a new book. It's called Aging Out, an exploration of caregiving, community, and how Americans grow old. And Lucy Schiller joins us now to talk about it. Lucy, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. And listeners, we can take some phone calls. Are you taking care of an aging relative? What's it like? If you're over 65 yourself, how are you navigating the system as you get older? And if you work in elder care in a nursing home, as a home health aide, or anywhere in that world, we want to hear from you to help Lucy Schiller keep reporting this story. We're at 212-433-WNYC. That's 212-433-9692. You can call us, you can text us. Looking forward to hearing from you. Okay, Lucy, let's dive in. Why'd you want to write this book?
Oh boy. Well, I think you summed it up pretty well. But, I spent this kind of strange to me, totally new period of months helping care for one of my grandmothers in a home. We had actually just taken her out of her assisted living facility at the very beginning of COVID because it seemed like, all of a sudden COVID was kind of ripping these types of places. And it was really one of the first times that I had such a level of exposure to just my grandmother's or an older person's kind of daily life. What goes into, being, in her case, in her early 90s, what types of care she needs, what her kind of emotional landscape at that moment in time was like, how tired she was. I think how exhausting old age can be for a lot of people. And I really had a lot of my assumptions about being older changed just by the fact of being in such close proximity to her. And then, about a year or a year and a half later, when I was living elsewhere, my other grandmother died alone of COVID in a fairly awful way. And it was one of many deaths that I was reading about, among older people in this country of COVID. And I just felt like, even though there was, of course, relentless news coverage of the fact that we were in a pandemic, the way in which I think socially we were talking about the deaths of these older people from the virus, there was an underlayer to it, I felt anyway, of, this is just the kind of natural extension of their older age, the fact that they're dying sometimes in these really awful or solitary or both ways. And so I just felt provoked, I felt like there's this whole aspect of human experience that I didn't really know that much about. And all of a sudden I am kind of overcome with it and I want to understand it better. And so from there, I kind of went into, what are the kind of bureaucracies and entanglements and structures around and underpinning older age.
Listeners, we can take some phone calls. Are you taking care of an aging relative? What's that like? And if you're over 65 yourself, how are you navigating the system as you get older? If you work in elder care, we'd love to hear from you too. That could be a nursing home, as a home health aide, or anywhere in that world. Give us a call, send us a text. We're at 212-433-WNYC. That's 212-433-9692. Lucy, we've got calls coming in already, so let's just turn to the phones. Craig in Morganville, New Jersey. Hi, Craig. Welcome to the show.
How you doing, guys? My parents were lucky to be part of the most expensive, exclusive club on the planet. They got to be cared for in their own home, die in their own home, and in their sleep. It is so expensive. It is insane. It's this growing field and how people get employed, but they're still underpaid. As much as you want to pay them, it's still a labor of love. It is just so horrible to navigate, and I don't know how people do it when they don't have the financial means to do it. It is so hard. It's just insane. It is a very expensive club. Thank you.
Craig, thank you so much for calling. And that labor of love that you were mentioning, I think probably resonates with a lot of folks. It resonates with me. I mean, Lucy, something I discovered while going through your book was that you and I have something in common, which is we are the exact same age. And during the pandemic, I also was, for a short period of time, the primary caretaker for one of my grandparents while he was in hospice care. And I think that it happens to folks much younger and much older than some folks would expect, being a caretaker and being involved in elder care. And so you write, and I'm quoting here, I had landed during the pandemic in a bedroom in a house with my maternal grandmother, Mary Ann, in Denver. It was there that I had begun to become preoccupied vaguely with the concept of oldness and aging. So you became a caregiver for Mary Ann. Just walk us through the experience as much as you're able. What were those early days of caregiving like for you and Mary Ann? Did you feel prepared for that experience?
Absolutely not. One thing I think about very often is how little preparation many of us have for this type of work, and it's incredibly hard work. You know, you're maybe checking on your loved one through the night, losing sleep of your own. You're maybe ensuring that you have all of the medication that they need and that there's not going to be a kind of gap in that kind of coverage. You're probably helping them do day-to-day tasks or cooking all of their meals for them, or helping them use the bathroom, or helping them clean up, go to the shower. And do all sorts of, I would say, kind of augmenting tasks around just the daily life of another person. So that might mean making phone calls. That might mean being the person who's in charge of checking their email if they have an email account, and ensuring that all of their passwords are up to date, or their subscriptions. If you think about how much of this kind of stuff we're doing for ourselves online, just ourselves, I think one thing that really surprised me was how much of my elderly loved one's life intersected with the internet in a way that she was not able to manage herself. So when I'm thinking about even my other grandmother, she would sometimes miss doctor's appointments because they would be like rescheduled for her via MyChart or via, the online portal that she was not able to use because she was disabled. I mean, she had she was blind in one eye from a bad cataract operation, and she had a tremor in her hand that prevented her from using the computer. So, it's those types of things that you're walking into as a caregiver that can be totally exhausting, as I'm sure anyone understands who has done this type of work, and also really important. I think there's an emotional burden as well, or not burden, but an emotional component to this, where you, of course, want to make sure that your loved one is getting the care that they deserve and that they need, and that you want them to have. And yet one person very often can only do so much.
So much, yeah. Let's go to Sean in Manhattan. Hi, Sean. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Everything that is being shared here is resonating with me very strongly. I'm actually the primary caregiver for two elderly parents, one with extreme physical disabilities and another who is navigating dementia. And one of the things two things that are really kind of hitting home is the challenge of maintaining your own life. And I'm not talking about the pleasure part of life. I'm talking about the daily living part of life. Like everything from washing clothes to grocery shopping for yourself becomes a real challenge. And the other piece is navigating the system. If your parents have not put things in order prior to this happening, or they were resistant to putting things in order, you're then left trying to figure out how to make sure they get the care that they need, and the system is really inadequate. You'll be told that there's certain services that are available, only to find out that they don't qualify for certain reasons, or there are things that you need to get access to that you don't have access to. So the challenges continue to stack up. They really do.
Sean, thank you.
So
Yeah, no, thank you so much for calling and for sharing that. And we wish the best to both of the folks, your parents that you're looking after right now, and yourself. And Lucy, I heard you kind of audibly nodding along, I would call it. Like a lot of that seemed to strike with you. Did you want to respond to what Sean was saying?
I love that. Yeah, I just love that Sean used the phrase "the system" because that's a phrase I encountered so much in my reporting and my thinking about that very thing, the elder care system and the sense that so many people have upon entering this system, whether they're a caregiver themselves or whether they're an older person, of like, this is a huge bureaucracy that I am learning as I go, and one thing that I really felt to be the case while working on this book, and also just in my own grandmother's experiences, was that aging is a really private and personalized thing in this country. The way that people kind of navigate through that so-called system, it really varies, depending on how much money you have access to, depending on how much preparation or education you have about that system, depending on whether you're on, Medicaid or Medicare Advantage, if it's a really good Medicare Advantage plan or a not so good Medicare Advantage plan. And then also, of course, your own, circumstances, what type of care you might need.
Let me step in there because I think since you brought up Medicare and Medicaid, this is something that I am seeing the chat blow up about right now, because here, I'll just take one text. It says, I'm 71, still working from home, still bicycle, still jog. What I dread is the prospect of navigating the U.S. healthcare system after I retire. Instead of making things simpler for us after we've worked for 50 years, we make it more complicated. And Lucy, you wrote when talking about Medicare that, quote, I did not know this when I started my reading, my interviews, my wanderings, but I was not alone in my basic ignorance. Nearly half of people over 65 think that Medicare covers long-term nursing home care. With such a statistic, you begin to wonder why such confusion abounds. Say more about that.
Yeah, so Medicare obviously is the public health care option for people over age 65, and also you can qualify for Medicare if you're younger and perhaps have a disability. But you would think, that Medicare, which is mostly known for being kind of the seniors' public health care program, would cover something as basic to aging as long-term care, right? This is something that maybe, you don't think that you're going to need or that you don't want to need, but you understand that a lot of older people at some point in their lives may need long-term care. Medicare, the public program does not cover long-term care, but Medicaid does. And so very often you hear these stories about people having to, quote unquote, spend down, perhaps sell their house or kind of enter a lower income bracket in order to qualify for Medicaid so that they can then enter a skilled nursing facility. Something else I didn't know, which just kind of tacks onto this, is that, and this is very basic information, but I was living in total ignorance, and why would I know? At that point, I was 30. Something else I didn't know is that, with assisted living facilities like the type that my grandmother Marianne lived in, those are for the most part private pay. And private pay is exactly what it sounds like. You pay out of your own pocket to enter those assisted living facilities. So it's a very kind of wealth or class stratified experience, the experience of receiving long-term care, and the different types of long-term care that exist in this country are very kind of stratified by how much money you have and where you live and what type of care you might need.
And to your point, the moment in your life at which you need to be the one navigating these things often is the moment of high stress, and you have not thought about it beforehand, and you have to learn, and you have to learn fast. And I think that is a sad situation that many of us have found ourselves in. Let's go to Nancy from Montclair, New Jersey. Nancy, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, yeah, I'm currently in Washington, D.C., testing out an independent assisted living place. And I thought you might be interested because one of your previous callers was saying it's such an exclusive club because it's so expensive. I'm a retired Foreign Service officer, and before I retired, I signed up for long-term care insurance. And I didn't realize that I was going to live as long as I am. I'm going to be 93 in next Saturday.
Oh, happy early
which is why
birthday.
I'm in
That's
DC.
wonderful.
Thank you. I'm celebrating with my daughter who lives in the D.C. area.
Love that.
At any rate, I'm very fortunate because I have long-term care insurance, and it pays a great deal of money. I've been investigating in, assisted living, independent living places, and they're all, the newest ones are very, very elegant and this one that I'm in right now is terrific. It costs $15,000 at least a month to be here. And my long-term care insurance pays $13,700 a month, so I can afford it. But, I don't have the usual kinds of needs that older people have. I have impaired eyesight, and I have family, but because they know I'm well taken care of, they're not rushing to my aid, and they're very busy people anyway. But no matter what your circumstances are, if you live long enough, it's going to be extremely difficult, even for the most fortunate people like me. And I hate to even complain because I realize that many other people do not have these advantages. And I see people here in this very elegant place that I'm living in who have mobility issues and memory issues. And, knock
Nancy,
on wood,
I'm wondering, can I ask
those.
you, Nancy, can I ask you, when did you decide to sign up for long-term care insurance?
I must have been at least, I don't remember, because it's very expensive. I was paying over $500 a month until I became eligible for long-term care insurance because of my eyesight. I don't have any of the other activities of daily living that they insist you must need help with, like dressing and eating and bathing or whatever. But they decided, the long-term care, it's a federal program, that because of my eyesight, I really need to have someone around to do some things. Like I can no longer be digitally intellectual as I used to be because I can't. People keep making more and more elegant websites that are more and more difficult for me to read.
Well, Nancy, I have to step in there real quick just for time, but thank you so much for sharing that. It does sound like that the eyesight issue that you had compelled you to sign up for that. And also, I just want to point out, happy next birthday next Saturday, 93 years old. Congratulations. Lucy, it is clear, listening to Nancy and other callers, just how complicated this all is. And one of the things you do in this book is to introduce us to individuals and groups advocating for the dignity of the elderly. One of these groups is the Gray Panthers. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, the Gray Panthers were and are a really kind of strident activist group. They were started in the 70s by a woman named Maggie Kuhn, who she's relatively well known still. She really made a mark. She was kind of a spokesperson for the group as well as its founder, and went on TV and was this kind of almost micro celebrity. She met multiple presidents. And what she was a radical. She really was interested in basic issues alongside rights for older people. What her idea was that she was of a generation that would sometimes be forced to retire against their will. That's kind of not something that we hear that much about anymore. But she felt that she had been forcibly retired from her job at the church where she worked. And she resented that, and she connected the issue of being kind of, as she felt, she called herself, she compared herself to a car in a scrap heap. She felt like she had been discarded, and that a lot of her older kind of friends and compatriots had been discarded from participating in society. And so she connected those feelings and those issues to racial justice, to economic justice, to environmental justice. And really what the Gray Panthers started as was a group that put all of those issues front and center. They were intergenerational. They recruited young people as well as older people to kind of take to the streets and protest and take all sorts of really quite radical actions for all of these issues, including kind of elder care and elder rights. One of their major kind of areas of interest was better conditions in nursing homes at the time. And, the Gray Panthers still are around. There's chapters in most major cities. I sat in on one particular group in the Bay Area, but there's also a chapter in New York City that I know is quite active. And they've really, they were active kind of during the COVID pandemic and also into today, kind of thinking through where issues like long-term care and kind of the dignity of older people sit kind of in our national conversation.
I just saw this text come through that said, I found hospital social workers have so much knowledge about this. However, you need to be tenacious in chasing them and following up. They are busy. That echoes my experience too, for what it's worth to listeners. Folks that are providers do have a lot of knowledge, and in many cases there are social workers that you can find who are assigned to you through a hospital system or should be assigned to you that can help give you information that otherwise might be totally murky and ambiguous. Let's go to Bill in Forest Hills. Bill, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, what's up?
Okay, great. So I want to pick up on the theme so far, which is awesome. There's a total dearth of information to older folks such as myself, and we're in the process of being in the middle of making many critical decisions. I have my son in from Stockholm, who's the next generation pressure resolving financial, also a computer expert, and we're out to lunch in that category. So we also have to make the maximum amount of business and dollars on our situation so we can live not in a luxurious obscenity, just decent living with Social Security and so forth and so on. So my basic question is, we need a very well-provided, comprehensive list of those sources we can go to for the maximum resources for the least amount of investment. I can't believe those prices you mentioned for living in a place that takes care of us. We can take care of ourselves or go out. And we want to go out. I want to go to Italy. My wife wants to go somewhere else. It's the whole panoply, and I can't wait for that book. And please repeat it at the end, so that we can buy a few copies for our friends that remain. And we have much work to do before it's all taken over by AI and all those guys with the zillions. I worked for Trump. I was an architect for him. I got the goods. Let's do it.
Bill, thank you so much for that call. I'm so happy with I really appreciate the phrase that you used, max info with the least amount of investment. And Lucy, I think that's what's on a lot of people's minds. Like, where do you go for information? And as we're winding up here, what have you found to be the most helpful places to turn people to, like Bill?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not going to be a very satisfactory answer, because I think most people are using basically whisper networks. Not that they have to whisper, but that's really the
We're not whispering right now. We're on there. Yeah, no, go for it.
Right, that's kind of where this information, spreads, is between trusted loved ones, between people who've had a certain experience, at one assisted living facility versus another. There is no, as far as I understand, really great one-stop shop place where people can get this type of information. And of course, it does vary, geographically. If I live in Phoenix, Arizona, I don't really need to read about a assisted living facility in, upstate New York or whatever. But so that's where I think social media sometimes has come in for a lot of people who I've spoken with. I know that people have gotten really good information there. I think social workers, which came up earlier, is often a really great place, obviously, to get a lot of good local information. There are, consultants have often created a kind of cottage industry here in people's kind of local areas. They often know good names and good places and good ways to navigate the system. But I would do your homework there. But yeah, one thing just to kind of add on here is I think that there's obviously a total lack of education at every level about these types of questions. And one thing that I think our society would be very much benefited by is young people learning about this early, learning about long-term care insurance, for instance, learning about the difference between a nursing home and an assisted living facility, learning how much all of these things are costing. I think that level of education would go a long way so that people, like many of the callers today, don't have to kind of age into this sudden shock and this sudden kind of overwhelm, right? Of like, where do I go? What do I do?
We'll have to leave it there. My guest has been Lucy Schiller, a nonfiction writer and the author of, and Bill, this is for you, the book title, Aging Out, an exploration of caregiving, community, and how Americans grow old. Lucy, thanks for sharing your experience, for writing this book, and for coming on today to talk to us about it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a total honor.
WNYC's journalism and storytelling is heard by millions of passionate listeners. Sponsors of our programming gain our listeners' attention and their respect. Learn about how your organization can support WNYC and WNYC Studios at sponsorship.wnyc.org.